Coming up this time on the show, we're going to be chatting with Anton Jacuto about how M-Tier uses BSD in their business. After that, we're going to be discussing the different release models across the BSDs and which style we like the most. As always, we'll have answers to your emails and, of course, all the latest news here on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 86, Business as Usual, recorded April 22nd, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got an exciting show. Alan's not in his usual location.
Yes, I'm on
you're on a mountain?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
I have a green screen behind me, so I've superimposed a mountain behind me.
Very cool. Very cool. So roughly where are you at? Are you close to Seattle or somewhere?
Yeah,
up in
I'm just
Washington?
north of Seattle in Arlington, Virginia. Or not Virginia,
Nice.
Washington.
That's a little ways from Virginia. Well, cool. Well, hopefully this all works out then.
Yes.
But yep, we're looking forward to. We got a Linux Fest Northwest coming up this weekend. So
Yes.
Alan and I will both be at that out at Bellingham, Washington.
Yes, and we'll be live streaming some of it as well.
Yes,
And,
yes. So if you have time this weekend, number one, if you're close enough to drive, come on out and see us, say hi.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, if you have time to watch, hop on, try and watch us live a little this weekend. We'll live stream a little bit of the show there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's first of all get into our headlines for the week. And we got an interesting one here right off the bat about optimizing TLS for high bandwidth applications.
Yes,
and
this is work that went on at Netflix. John Mark Gurney, who we've interviewed before, as well as Scott Long, who we've interviewed before. And I guess we'll have to hunt down Randall Stewart and interview him.
Cool.
But basically, Netflix has built these Open Connect appliances, which are, 64-bit Xeons with, a couple gigs of RAM or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they use them to push all the movies that people watch on Netflix and the TV shows and so on. And when they originally built them, they were, they optimized them and managed to be pushing 10 gigabits per second out of each box. But since then, they've upgraded to 40 gigabit NICs and or first they had 110 and then two 10s, and now they have pushing 40 gigabits of traffic out of a single machine. And in doing so, they've had to make, quite a few improvements to FreeBSD to be able to do that. But then, after the Snowden revelations and so forth, they decided that they wanted to do everything over HTTPS. And so this adds a whole another layer of complexity.
Yeah, that's a huge layer of complexity there.
Yeah. And, previously it was thought that TLS, they just didn't have enough CPU power to be able to encrypt all 40 gigabits of that traffic all the time. And part of the thing was, in order to be able to push that 40 gigabits, they had been relying on sendfile, which is an infrastructure where,
that's what
when the
Nginx uses, right?
Yeah, Nginx and Apache can use it. And basically, instead of the web server reading the file off the disk and then pushing it into the socket, and then it goes through the kernel and gets transmitted and so on, the web server just says, hey, kernel, read that file over there and send it to the user, and the web server kind of goes out of the equation, and the kernel does all the work. And this is much quicker and avoids all the context switching. However, that doesn't work when you're trying to do encrypted traffic because the encryption runs in userland. Right, so the browser has to read the file, encrypt the blocks, and then send them out through the socket. And so their proposed solution for this was basically a new thing like sendfile that does TLS. So you can be like, here's my data, please encrypt it with this certificate and send it out to the user. And so they wrote a paper which they presented at Asia BSDCon explaining how they did that.
Nice.
And so you can see currently the way I had to work is you have the network, you read I/O. So the Nginx does a read call, which gets the I/O, pulls it in, it SSLs it, and then they use the write call to send it out to the network. With the new one, the I/O goes right into the virtual memory system, and then socket bulk encryption happens, and it goes out to the network. And the only part Nginx is involved in is providing the SSL certificate.
Okay. So have they actually put this in already and tried using that, or is it still in development?
I think this is actually deployed now.
It's deployed,
sure,
okay.
But they're definitely working towards it, if not.
Yeah, definitely. Have we seen any merges go by that put into FreeBSD head?
I haven't actually looked at that.
Okay, well, we'll have to check into that and see if that's already made it in, but that's still cool.
Yeah, and you can see here's the graphs they have here, and they show the RevD platform, which is the one, if I recall correctly, is their machine that's all SSDs instead of hard drives, which is mostly what they need to be able to pull 40 gigabits a second to push it out.
Sure.
But once they switch to using the SSL version of SendFile, they get very good performance and actually pushing out all the traffic.
That's fantastic. Saturating, huh?
Yeah, it looks like they're managing to do it quite well.
Dang. Well, nice. Well, that is a pretty neat way to do encryption in the kernel there.
Yeah, and they have a list of things that they've been working on, or things that they want to work on, including enhancing the SHA-256 and 512 code so that you can use AES-NI with block cipher chaining and so on. Adding the HMAX and stuff like that, eliminating the extra copy that happens in the current system by expanding the open crypto framework so that you can pass additional pointers instead of having to copy the data, and enhance the way floating point saves occur in the processor to optimize everything.
Oh, that's pretty neat. Well, speaking of crypto, in our next article, we have crypto in unexpected places, and we'll have a link in the show notes to one of the mailing list posts here. But of course, we've talked OpenBSD a lot, and it's well known for its integrated cryptography, right down to strong randomness in pretty much every place you can imagine. Yes. But one place you may not expect crypto to be used, or why would you, is the ping utility, right? Yeah. Well, think again. They've fixed that. So recently, it looks like David Gwen committed a change that adds a message authentication code to the ping timestamp payload. And by default, it's filled with a cha-cha stream instead of an unvarying payload. And,
like normally in a ping, I think most operating systems literally just send A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so you can't tell the response of one ping from another. Whereas if you actually, other than like the sequence number, but if you're actually putting random data in there, they say it's easier to kind of detect dodgy network equipment and figure out where errors are coming from.
Yeah. And he says also in one of the quotes here, this lets us have some confidence that the timestamp hasn't been damaged or tampered with in transit. So that's a very interesting use of cryptography here.
Yeah. So that somebody in the middle can't mess with your ping and make it look like it wasn't taking as long as it was because, some interception was happening or something.
Yeah, definitely. So a neat security feature, like Alan said, might help detect dodgy or malfunctioning network equipment going forward. And I'll be interested to see if this propagates elsewhere into other BSDs as well. And of course, maybe we can now wait for the cryptographically secure echo command, right? Yes. or maybe not. Yes. But it is interesting to see where you can put cryptography where you normally would not consider it.
Yep. I wouldn't have thought of that one, but after somebody does it, it's like, oh, that's actually a pretty good idea.
It makes sense when you hear it explained, but to come up with the idea initially is like, oh, that's a new one. I hadn't considered that.
Yep.
Okay, well, next up we have some Dragonfly news, specifically talking about the new Broadwell CPUs in Dragonfly. And the Dragonfly BSD guys have started a new page up on their wiki to discuss Broadwell hardware and its current status, where it's at. Matt Dillon, the project lead, recently got some new hardware with this chipset, and he's laying out here on the wiki what works, what doesn't work. And basically, the main two biggies, the showstoppers at the moment, are both, of course, graphics and wireless. Yep. But they already have somebody who's making progress with the GPU support. So part of it's happening. And they mentioned that wireless support will probably wait until FreeBSD gets it, then they'll port it back over.
Yep.
So
wireless is hard.
Wireless is difficult.
Like, the particular hardware they're playing with at the moment is a Gigabyte Bricks, which is Gigabyte's version of the Intel NUC.
Yep.
So a nice little tiny machine with. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see the Broadwell graphics stuff happen.
Definitely.
So if we can finally get caught up with Haswell, maybe Broadwell won't be as far behind.
That's what I'm hoping. It sounds like a lot of the work they've done to get us to Haswell will help make the next steps going from beyond Haswell be a lot smoother, just more of a straight port of the Linux code. But that's a neat little system he's got there. I'm looking, he says 9.5 watts at idle. So definitely a low power device. But wish you guys luck with that. And we'll keep an eye on it, of course, and bring you the latest as more support gets integrated. We will note that none of the BSDs at the moment currently have full Broadwell support. Yep. So, of course, we will bring you that as it happens. I'm sure stuff will be
those devices have literally just gone on sale.
Yeah. They're just starting to poke their heads up out there in the wild. So we're going to start seeing, I'm sure, commits go by where bits of that get fixed and added. Okay, next up we have some do-it-yourself NAS software. So we have a roundup here, this is a really cool blog post I read through earlier here, where the author is comparing different software solutions for a NAS device.
And of course, inspired by Top Gear.
Yes, which is really cool. He's got the chalkboard and everything, so it's pretty slick. But he puts FreeNAS, one of his favorites, up against a number of opponents. So he looks at both BSD and Linux-based NAS, and NAS for free gets an honorable mention as well, particularly for lower hardware requirements and sleek interface. But if you've been thinking about putting together a NAS but aren't quite comfortable enough to set it up yourself yet, this article kind of gives you a good top-level overview of all the big names out in the field. You know, what your options are, what specifically makes each one unique and tick. And of course, competition's good for these projects. So we got to keep everyone on their toes. And it's neat to kind of see a roundup where it evaluates all of them and lists their strengths and weaknesses. Any particular takeaways you had on this one, Alan?
No. Apparently he was getting slightly better throughput on the Linux one, but I'm sure that's just a tuning thing because,
Yeah.
My home ZFS array could max out my gigabit Ethernet a couple times over.
Oh, easily.
It currently does, actually. I have a lag set up and everything.
Nice. Well, cool. Well, speaking of FreeNAS, this is a great time to mention, of course, the first sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems, which is the company that brings you a lot of FreeNAS and behind that. And the URL for that, ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you can go.
That, you heard about it here.
Yes. You can go and be sure you always mention BSD Now to these folks when you're talking to the sales guys and ordering your system. That's right. They love us. But anyway, you'll want to go there, fill out the form, download the free guide for open source so you can find ways to talk about IX Systems and things you need to know when you're talking to management to help select a vendor when you're purchasing a new server for storage or for whatever it is you're trying to do in your business. IX has probably made something similar in the past. And if not,
even better.
Yes. And the cool thing is, if it's something new, they like the challenge. So definitely explain to them what the problem is you're trying to solve and let them come up with a custom solution that'll work for you.
For sure.
And we have, it looks like a link this week here, Alan, the IX Systems experience. I'll let you talk about that since you can see the screen.
Just another post up on their blog talking about what's going on. And they're talking about, he says, this is another post by Matt Finney, the lead of the sales team over there, and saying people are always shocked when they find out that I'm in sales because he knows all the technical stuff. And when you call up some other company's sales guy and try to talk to them about SAS controllers or whatever, they're going to be like, I can refer you to an engineer. It's like, no. See, at IX, they have sales engineers who actually know about the stuff they're trying to sell you and can actually, answer your questions about it and help you decide what's the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So again, we'll mention that URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Go there, get in touch with them, let them make it happen for you. Remember, come prepared. Let them know what the problem is you're trying to solve so that their sales engineers can help you figure out the best solution to that. Not just sell you something that's laying on the shelf that they built 6 months ago. No, let's figure out what works best for you today. Everything's
custom built exactly to your specifications, which makes a big difference too.
Definitely. We're joined now by Antoine Jacuteau, who's a OpenBSD user. I assume are you a developer as well?
Yep.
Okay. And you're going to be talking to us a little bit about business adoption of BSD and various topics. So first of all, thank you, of course, for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So give us a little bit about yourself. How did you first get into BSD and what brought you to the point where you're sitting here doing an interview with us?
Okay. Well, I guess my way to OpenBSD is pretty boring since it must match what most other people are doing. It's basically, I'm an OS addict. Started being an admin back in the days, like 15, 20 years ago, using Windows. Moved on to Linux, obviously. Well, actually, I got hired during the .com era by this IT company. They were looking for an administrator because they were basically picking up administrator out of internship school. So people were saying like 3 months here, 6 months there. So they wanted to hire the full-time admin. So I came along. So like, I don't know, 50 different servers running all kind of different Linuxes, Windows, etc. Like SUSE Linux running, was it Domino Notes? Yeah, from IBM at the time. Yeah, exactly. So I came on and rationalized the whole infrastructure. And at that time, there was one FreeBSD machine, and that was an OS I've never heard about before. So I actually looked at it, got pretty interested.
What was that machine running, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, it was running a backup MX.
Okay.
So nothing really, fancy or anything. But so I moved everything to Linux at the time because that's what I knew. But I kept the FreeBSD machine along to play with it. Loved it. Started using FreeBSD more and more. And along, I got interested about the BSD family in general, and ended up on OpenBSD.
Sure.
The reason I ended up on OpenBSD and did not stay on FreeBSD was mainly because of binary packages. I didn't want to have to set up a build cluster to build my packages or build the packages on the machine. And at least at that time, the binary packages on OpenBSD were really much better than what they were on FreeBSD. I'm talking like, I don't know, 12 years ago or something.
Well, that was true up until like a year ago still. So.
Yeah. That's true. Well, actually,
you have fixed that now, right?
Well, I wouldn't put it this way. I'm still running some FreeBSD boxes, and I have some issue with packages with it. We can come back to it later if you want.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, binary packages was the first thing I stuck with for OpenBSD. Then there was also the fact that I didn't want to have anything to worry or to do about OS security. There are very clever dudes in the OpenBSD taking care about the security of the operating system. And that was just making my job easier. I didn't have to worry about that part. I only had to worry about the security of my applications or, my firewall rules or whatever, but the OS, I could trust it. And the third and most important was actually the fact that it's just that simple to use. That's basically the three things that made me stick with OpenBSD.
So that you told us how you got into OpenBSD in the first place, but tell us how you became a developer.
Okay, so that was roughly 10 years ago. At the time, I was migrating a mail infrastructure from Linux to OpenBSD. The company I was working for wanted to keep the exact same infrastructure they were using, including the software, which was Cyrus IMAP at the time. And there was no Cyrus port for OpenBSD. So that's basically how I got the first step in. Ported Cyrus IMAP, got eventually committed to the ports tree, and then I got invited to, I think it was P2K6, which was the first ports hackathon in Budapest, Hungary. And well, that's how it all started. Then I started meeting all these awesome people and got along with.
Nice. You got sucked in and they haven't let you go, right?
Oh, yes. That's exactly what happened.
I think a lot of us have had that same experience. So we'll change gears a little bit, though. Tell us what exactly MTier is and what do you guys do there?
MTier is a do-it-all company when it comes to Unix. We do a lot of infrastructure, Unix system deployments, consultancy, training. When I say Unix, mostly BSD and Linux, obviously. We do a lot of Puppet and a lot of Bacula. With, consulting and deployment, basically. We also do like personalized trainings, or we do trainings for Puppet Labs as well. So yeah, that's what we do. Now, the most interesting part of our business and the core of our business and what's interesting when it comes to BSD system is that we're deploying an OpenBSD based operating system for, well, I would put it this way, a niche market that's used by a lot of different blue chips companies over the world. Like really huge company that have very specific needs, operating in like 150 plus countries.
Sure.
So we're providing this operating system for them, and yeah, that's what MTR is about. That's what it was built from, basically. Yeah.
So that kind of gets into the question of where is BSD used within the company, and how and what do you actually use it for?
In our company, it's used pretty much for anything. I think the only reason, well, the only time we're not using OpenBSD is when we have virtualization needs within the company. But other than that, we're using BSD everywhere. We have mostly 90% OpenBSD, and we have a few free BSD boxes, stuff like that. Now, at our customer, in regards to the product I was telling you about, it's used everywhere and at 100% scale. It's used from the anthracite firewall and router up to the Joe user workstation. Including servers for all kind of different services, file service, Kerberos, LDAP, DNS, DHCP, you name it. They're using it for well, VPN, obviously. Everything.
So what were the particular aspects that drew you in the direction of using a BSD versus, say, a Linux or something else even?
The reason we ended up with OpenBSD is both, there's a legal reason and there's a security reason. Unfortunately, that's the extent of what I can say, because I'm under several NDA within the business we're in. But these are the most prominent reason we're using OpenBSD. There is the interesting fact about using such non-mainstream operating system is that we have to cope with big companies. We have to cope with like a lot of history within the company. That we're working with companies which IT department is bigger than the biggest IT company in their country. So you can imagine the scale and the history. I mean, they've been having procedures and everything for, I don't know, 30 years or something. So it's quite a bit of a challenge to use such a non-mainstream operating system as OpenBSD and fit in the big picture. So, and the second challenge is that obviously a lot of people in the country we operate in do not have a lot of experience regarding Unix in general and BSD in particular. You can find some Linux experience, but most of the time people have no clue about BSD, whether it's FreeBSD, OpenBSD, or even NetBSD. So that forced us to provide a solution that is completely self-managed and bundled. So I mentioned Puppet earlier, that we use in MTR. That's something we use a lot at our customers' place as well, so that we can basically come, set up an install server, and then they just push a button, and the entire infrastructure is completely bootstrapped for them. Whether you're installing a new router or firewall, workstation, even server, whatever, you PXE boot, Puppet would kick off, recognize the type of the machine you're trying to install. We'll auto partition everything, install the proper packages, configure, and well, pretty much do everything, and that's like a major part of our work, because most of the people we're dealing with are coming from a Windows background.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah, and then of course we have all the goodies that come with Unix system. We're fully redundant. We have a full CARP network. All network services are redundant. All infrastructure services are redundant, et cetera, et cetera.
So, it's not uncommon for companies to use BSD for servers and firewalls and even storage appliances. But what's the experience been like making end users use it as like a desktop workstation?
Well, in the current state of affair, it's not that big of a deal, actually. But it did require a huge amount of work. When I first joined MTier, I don't know, a bazillion years ago, we were working on version 2.8 or 6 of the GNOME desktop, which at the time was completely broken on OpenBSD. It was crashing all over. Well, first it was very outdated, and it was crashing all over. Well, basically nothing was working. The only real desktop that was useful at the time was a KDE3. But GNOME was in a very, very, very bad shape. So we started to work on that, bring GNOME in a somewhat workable working state, I would say. And then when we had that, we started, of course, maintaining it and adding specific feature that Windows user would expect from the regular desktop, like after you plug your USB key, I want, like Nautilus to appear automatically, opens up, and everything is auto-mounted. I don't want you to have to use a mount command or whatever. People were wondering why when they put a CD in, nothing was happening and stuff like that. Or Wi-Fi, for example. We're also develop a small Wi-Fi GUI for OpenBSD so that people can roam between the offices and easily change their Wi-Fi network instead of having to update etc something. That's actually the part I like the most in the work we're doing. BSD are great for servers. OpenBSD is very easy on the server. It's meant for that. Yep. Workstation, you have to find the OS in some way, and I find it a bit more exciting. I mean, there are challenges that are pretty fun to resolve. And it can be annoying at times, but it's actually kind of, you learn a lot from having really regular non-IT users using your system, and that's as the most difficult but the most fun part about it.
That is for us too, because they see things that we take for granted. We assume. God. Oh yeah, I just run this command and that command. It does this, and they're like, "Well, I don't know where to click."
Not only that. I mean, they're doing stuff that you didn't even know that could be done. They're like, "I do and press this and that. It should work like this." And I was like, "How did they come up with that?" I mean, it's completely crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
But so yeah, that was quite a challenge. Then there was the GNOME 3 move, which was yet another challenge, because once we got GNOME 2 perfectly working, GNOME 3 started to come out.
Yep, sure.
And that was a challenge. That was a technical challenge for us on OpenBSD because of 3D support. First, it was regular GUI was enough, but pretty much they moved everything to KMS. So we had to push the KMS a bit. We actually sponsored, MTier sponsored KMS on OpenBSD. It was part of the sponsoring team. But GNOME 3 was quite a huge challenge. Actually, I want to say that all this work I'm doing on GNOME, it's not just me. I'm doing with my Hobbit friend. That's how we're calling each other now. We're Hobbits since we're working on GNOME. Jasper Levi Sadriense, Jasper at openbsd.org. So for the GNOME 3 development, we basically locked each other like for 4 days in a hotel room to start moving away from GNOME 2 to GNOME 3.
You can leave once.
Yeah, you can leave when it works.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I know you're talking a little bit about this now, but what could we do to adopt BSD in their infrastructure? And are there more areas like this you'd like to see improved, and not just open, but in FreeBSD or other BSDs as well?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure what the magical recipe is for BSD to be, more used in business or in companies in general. I think people are starting to be aware of the fundamental difference between the BSD and Linux, and the actual added values of a FreeBSD machine compared to a Linux machine, or OpenBSD machine compared to a Linux machine, for different kind of tasks. Honestly, I don't know, but what most of the company that I run into, they are using BSD in some regards. I know a lot of companies that are using FreeBSD for storage, for example, especially since ZFS came along. And I know a lot of companies that use OpenBSD for firewalls, routing, PGP, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They just don't publicize it for whatever reason.
It's kind of a best kept secret thing.
Yeah, well, it's, I guess, most companies don't really advertise that they use Brocade switches or whatever either, right? It's just behind the scenes type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it depends on the IT department that you have. I mean, if you have people that are knowledgeable enough in BSD or Linux or Unix in general and can actually handle support, then these people will bring BSD in the company. Because that's basically the major deal for companies, that you have to have support. Right. I mean, if something doesn't work, and what doesn't work is what everyone is using, then you cannot lose your job. I mean, it's always the same story. Well, if you bring OpenBSD machine and the entire firewall infrastructure crashes for whatever reason, then you'll be at fault.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess it's the same. The same story was Linux 10 years ago. Why aren't people more using Linux in company 10 years ago? So it's always the same story.
Yeah. So could you tell us about OpenUp and the binpatch-ng, and what are they and what do they do?
Yep, sure. Well, I'm going to start with binpatch-ng because OpenUp is kind of what kind of needs binpatch-ng. Binpatch-ng is basically a set of makefires that helps you create packages to update part of the base system. So let's say you have an OpenSSL security update to patch, which is a trend currently. Then binpatch-ng will help you create a package that you can install on your OpenBSD machine to replace your vulnerable OpenSSL. It's kind of it doesn't look at all like FreeBSD update, but it has the same intent to keep the stable release updated with the latest patches, whether these are security patches, reliability patches, etc. It's not something that we created. It was something actually created by someone called Gerardo Santana a few years ago. Then Felix Kronlage, who's a former OpenBSD developer, took it over, renamed it binpatch-ng, then dropped it off, and since then we started using it and maintaining it and adding feature to it. So the nice thing about binpatch-ng is that, well, the thing is that OpenBSD, the stable OpenBSD tree, doesn't provide binary releases. If there is a security issue in a supported release, you have to rebuild your own release, or you have to apply the patch and rebuild it yourself on your home machine and distribute it somehow. So that's the reason we came up with the binpatch-ng service. Is that you build it once on a build machine, and then you can deploy it as a package, just package add binpatch blah 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 on 1,000 machines or whatever. And it has rollback support, so if you break a binpatch, then you can roll back. So yeah, it's
Nice.
like the BSD update approach. Only it's faster.
Yeah, it's a little closer to what we're trying to accomplish with packaging the base system and being able to install them with the package command.
Yes, that's exactly it, except that we're not planning on packaging the base system. But
Right.
other than that, yes, it's
just-
exactly how it works. Yeah. So we're open up in that picture. Well, the thing is that binpatch-ng creates you a package, but if you want to install a package, you have to know its name, right? And you don't want to spend, every hour looking at the MTR page to see if there's a new binpatch release, or the stable OpenBSD security page, or to see if there's a new errata that came out. So OpenUp is just a really stupid script that basically scans the MTR repo for new binpatch, compare it to what you have on your machine, and install them. Because you don't want to have to input package add binpatch dash kernel, whatever. What was the name again? I don't know. Whatever. So just run OpenUp. It will install all the bin patches you're missing. It will also update all your packages. And yeah, that's it. That's all it does. I mean, it's a pretty simple tool. It's not clever. It does its job. There's a cron mod. If you don't want to install anything automatically, it would just send you a mail that's saying that what this needs a security update and blah blah blah. There is a nice side effect though of all this binpatch and OpenUp thing that we've been doing at MTR. Is that since then people have been made a bit more aware about about OpenBSD stable, and even the OpenBSD developer now start to commit a lot more into stable, at least the packages side, than they used to. Usually most of the developer run current, don't really care about backporting security. Well, did not really care about backporting security issues and things.
Yeah, and especially
but
like
that changed a couple of years ago when it started to change, and now you can see a lot of coming to stable, which really wasn't the case before. And I think that's really great for everyone.
We're kind of hoping to see the same thing in FreeBSD. For example, the 9 stable branch, there's not going to be another release from it. But if you're running 9.3, it'd be nice to get some of those fixes that have been committed or whatever, but you're just never going to see them.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. So what else personally do you work on in the OpenBSD project?
Oh, God. You mean besides maintaining like
What else
450 plus ports? Well, I wrote sysmerge, which a few years ago was based out of Merge Master. It got pretty much rewrote almost from scratch since then. So I guess most of the people know what it does. It helps you update your base system configuration file. But there is one feature that I added in the meantime, is that you can now update not only base system configuration file, but you can also update ports configuration file. I don't remember how it works in FreeBSD exactly. I think you have .sample or something like that, right?
There's usually like a whatever.conf-dist, which is the version that came with the package.
Right. Okay, it's a bit different on OpenBSD because we're not using user local etc, where we're putting all the configuration under /etc, even the ports one. So it works a bit like the RPM new stuff from Red Hat. So when you install a package and that it comes with a configuration file that lies under etc, and that you're upgrading this package, but you already configure the etc file, of course it will not override your modification. That's how it should work. And sysmerge now has support to help you the same way merge master in FreeBSD works for /etc file. Can help you merge port configuration, sampled configuration into file that you already edited.
Yep. Cool. And then the last question we have is: was there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Well. Oh yeah, there are a lot of things I want to mention. No, actually, I was just finishing of what all the work I was doing on OpenBSD. Besides sysmerge, I wrote the RCD system along with Robert and Ingo. So now we can start, reload, restart, blah, blah, services in a easier way than it was before, well, at least in a more consistent way than it used to be. And also write the RC control, which is like a mix of check config and service in Linux. So you can it's like an RC local editor / start, restart your services.
Yeah, there's a similar command on FreeBSD, sysrc. For editing.
Yeah, there's sysrc, and well, it's like the mixing sysrc and
service. The service command, yeah.
The reason why I actually wrote that in the first place is because we're, as I mentioned, we're losing a lot of Puppet or even Ansible and Salt, and it was we needed some consistent way to handle services.
Exactly. I use the same thing for FreeBSD because trying to teach Puppet to edit the config file properly was it's like, well, sysrc just does it. So I can just run a command, check, is it the right value? If not, run this command to fix it, and problem solved. Especially since, well, at least under OpenBSD, RC local can take a lot of different parameters. And it used to be a source shell script, which is not anymore, but so it was even worse than that. That's the other thing is sysrc will make sure that it's still going to parse properly when you're done.
Yes. Yeah.
So that your system doesn't become unbootable.
Yeah. Yep. Other than that, I've ported Lumina, which you guys are talking about often for PCBSD. Runs great. I'm mainly doing a lot of, 95% of the work I do on OpenBSD is sports related. Other than the RC stuff or sysmerge, that I do some couple stuff in source, but not that much. Also maintain the FTP, the French FTP mirror, stuff like that. Mentor the GSOC for System BSD as well.
Nice.
A whole bunch of different stuff.
Yep. And then the other thing we were going to talk about at the beginning of the show, you mentioned the problems you were having with the FreeBSD package system.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not a problem per se. It's that on the OpenBSD, you have something called flavor for packages. That you can install packages like I want dovecode with LDAP support. Okay, you have a packages for that. It's dovecode version -LDAP. Okay, so do you know you have to have LDAP support in that? The issue I'm running with FreeBSD on our Bacula server is that I have Bacula running on a MySQL database. And the default options for FreeBSD is to compile it against PostgreSQL. So each time I'm going to run a package, update, upgrade, and it will ask me to reinstall Bacula server because options change and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and so you end up either having to use your own poudre and compile your own packages, or
except that I don't have that. Well, I don't have enough FreeBSD machines to set up poudre and stuff like that. So I just rebuild it on the local machine because it's actually the only until a few months ago where I had also to recompile, I think PHP or something. But now it's the only package that I need to recompile, so it's not such a big deal. And I talked to Baptiste, and he said that it was going to work on the flavor-like feature for package at some point. So
and there's also been talk about realizing that, hey, this version of Bacula was compiled from ports, didn't come from a binary package, and I know what options were used when it was installed. These aren't the same as the package. I'm going to recompile this from ports for you as part of the package upgrade.
Yeah, that would be pretty neat. Yeah.
Of course, that requires the package system to make sure that your ports tree is up to date. Or specifically,
to ship a copy of the ports data, maybe the package you're compiled with.
Right, so specifically so that your ports tree isn't slightly newer and be like, oh, I need a newer version of like libtool or something silly like that.
Yeah.
Well, as long as I don't have to rebuild stuff. I hate building things. I do that every day, all day. So I really hate it.
Well, that's having the ports tree installed via package is what I like, Alan. Just package add ports.
And it would provide the version of the ports tree. Yeah, it would provide the version of the ports tree that all the packages were built against so that everything will line up.
And then when I do package upgrade my port tree with it, that would be really cool. So they're always in sync.
Yeah. We just need to find some way to say, hey, don't keep a P list for the ports tree. We don't need to register all like 150,000 tiny files.
It does get a little large, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on and talking to us.
Yeah, we appreciate this so much, Anton, and thanks for working through all the technical issues with us, and we're glad we're able to get this opportunity.
Yeah, no problem. It was a pleasure. Pleasure being here. Just want to say one last word. For me, it's an honor to be part of the OpenBSD team. It's a very, very clever team. I'm amazed at how these clever people managed to build such a great operating system. So I know OpenBSD developer asked for that a lot, but I will say that this project needs donation. That's the only way it can work. We're a very small development team. Friendship is the heart of the project, and the project body must be fed with donation. So we appreciate any kind of donation. A few days ago we got Exoscale, this Swiss cloud company, helping us to build a ports infrastructure built for OpenBSD. So it's not just about money donation. It's anything, hardware, anything is good to get to keep us going.
Yes,
great. Well, thank you so much for mentioning that. Of course.
OpenBSDFoundation.org?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yep. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah, if you use any of the BSDs or any kind of BSD, put your money where your mouth is, and go out there and support it. They could use it, and that's what makes this awesome technology keep going.
Yeah, basically, if you're on the internet, you're already using it.
One thing before I leave, Chris.
Sure.
You gave me a challenge with your hat.
Uh-oh, what you got?
So...
Nice. Yeah, I'm just feeling in a Star Wars mood this week.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us.
No problem, guys. It was a pleasure.
Yes. Look forward to talking to you again in the future. Okay, so before we head into the news roundup, of course, we want to mention another sponsor this week, which is going to be DigitalOcean, where you can go get signed up, use the coupon code FREEBSDNOW, which will give you a $10 credit, and that's good to pretty much run a VM for 2 months on their lower tier one. So that's definitely a great way to get signed up and try throwing FreeBSD up in the cloud there and test that out.
And the great thing is even that cheap $5 instance, you spin it up, it takes less than 55 seconds to be ready to go. It's all backed on SSDs, so you get much better disk performance than you would get off, usually in a VM, that's the biggest downside is the disk performance isn't that great. But when it's all backed by SSDs, not a problem anymore. You also get tier 1 bandwidth, very, very good quality bandwidth, and you get lots of it. I think even the $5 one includes a terabyte, and the $10 one is like 2 terabytes. Yeah, and that's per month. That's more traffic than you need, and you get full gigabit too. So you can actually use that terabyte if you want to. It's all backed by KVM. They have a really easy to use control panel. It's all really good, Intel hex-core machines with ECC RAM. And on top of the control panel, you can also get access to their new API where you can programmatically do whatever it is you need to do.
Spin up and tear down VMs as need be, which is definitely very cool.
Private networking between your VMs. So that you're not eating up your 1 terabyte of bandwidth. If you have your web server and your database server on separate VMs, the traffic between them doesn't count against your And
See,
you
it's
can
those little touches that sometimes make all the difference too.
yeah, and they have locations all over the world, including Amsterdam, San Francisco, New York, London, Singapore, and a new one in Frankfurt, Germany.
Okay, well, again, the URL for that's going to be digitalocean.com. So go there, get signed up now, and don't forget coupon code FreeBSD now.
Yes,
But
get your $10. And if
That's
you've already
right.
signed up, you can apply it retroactively and still get your $10.
Oh, sweet. So yeah, go do that now. Don't forget, that's free money. Okay, well, speaking of DigitalOcean, we're moving into our news roundup now.
A little
Our
hack
first
for
story.
DigitalOcean.
That's right.
Yes.
So I know we've talked about their support for FreeBSD, and we've had people email us asking about, well, what about OpenBSD? Well, guess what? There's a way to do that, kind of a backdoor method of
Yeah,
making that happen.
It reminds me of the Depenguinator that Colin Percival wrote.
Yeah.
When you rented machines from ISPs back before they were VMs, it's like, hey, it's Linux, and they don't offer BSD, but all right, give me Linux, and I'll remotely reformat it as FreeBSD. And so
right.
here, Tubsta.com has a guide on how to do exactly that to a FreeBSD DigitalOcean instance and turn it into OpenBSD.
Tricky.
Yeah, so DigitalOcean, they make sure they have a minimum level of documentation and support and to be able to help users with it. And so they haven't launched OpenBSD yet, although it's one of the most requested things in their user voice section. But here we have the instructions, if you don't want to wait, how you can take your FreeBSD DigitalOcean instance that you got with the FreeBSD Now code and run OpenBSD on it. Basically, you turn off the swap file, overwrite the swap with a mini root image of OpenBSD, and then when you boot, you'll be into it, and then you can run the installer and overwrite the FreeBSD main partition with your OpenBSD, and you'll be up and running.
That's pretty slick. Yeah, it's a neat trick. That does sound a lot like the Depenguinator method there.
It does. It's basically exactly the same idea.
Yeah. But after doing that, you can just boot from the normal web UI-based console, perform a standard installation, and away you go. You end up with OpenBSD in a VM. You have to pay some special attention when you're doing this to some of the disk layout details, but this article does walk you through it step by step. So as long as you follow the instructions, you should be in good shape. One thing I think he added at the end, though, I don't know if you saw that, Alan, was that it doesn't work if you try and clone it. So you'd have to do this, I guess, for each.
Stuff, I think it's the script that sets the clone's IP address and SSH keys and all that hasn't been set up for OpenBSD yet. So.
And somebody on IRC asked if this voids the end user license agreement. I don't know off the top of my head.
There is a strict agreement about what you do with your VM. Like there's an acceptable use policy, but that's about what you're doing to the internet with your VM, not what you're doing to your VM.
Yep. So
it definitely probably voids the support.
Sure. If you call up and
if you want to run OpenBSD, you probably don't need support anyway.
That's right. Yeah, you're hardcore, man. You know what you're doing, so you're in good shape. Okay, well, next up in the roundup, we have some news about ARM64. It looks like some of the initial support has landed its way in the FreeBSD repo this last week, but sometimes ARM64 is called ARMv8 or AArch64.
Yeah,
it's
like 6 other names.
Yeah. So whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, we're going to call it ARM64 here, but it's a new generation of CPU that's mostly going to be in embedded devices, and FreeBSD just added some support for this in the current branch, of course, which is where stuff initially lands.
Quite a few people worked on this. Obviously, Andrew, who did a lot of the work, SemiHalf, which is a company in Europe that does a lot of FreeBSD stuff, Edmast, and some people from ARM itself. On top of, I think, also related to some of this work is Cavium donating some hardware that uses this ARM64 stuff so that developers could work on it.
Yeah, you need something to actually run it on and play with it. But I guess previously only the beginnings of the kernel and enough bits to boot and QEMU were there. But now looks like a full build is on the verge of being possible here.
It's actually been added now, I think, to the Make Universe target. So that's a target that does a cross compile of basically it's the way developers are supposed to test a change, right? You build everything for every architecture and make sure it works. And ARM64 is now supported by that, and the main generic kernel for ARM64 gets built as part of the testing phase now. And we've also got some like Jenkins integration testing stuff running on it now. So we'll be alerted right away if somebody accidentally breaks ARM64 support with some other commit.
Well, hopefully we'll
So
see
it's on
this
its way
get
to being,
elevated to like a tier one at some point with packages and the whole 9 yards. That would be great. I'm sure that will get brought up at the next BSD can here soon, maybe at the Developer Summit.
Also, at the Developer Summit, there's a whole section on working on power domains and processor domains for dealing with some of those ARM things that have 2 different size processors.
Sure.
You know, one to do heavy lifting, one to run all the time for light stuff to save battery and so on. So it'll be really interesting to see where some of this stuff goes.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Well, next up, I know I'm a big shell scripting guy, so this one caught my attention here, but we have scripting with the least amount of privilege possible.
Yes, it's called Shill.
Yeah, and it's by somebody with the last name Moore, no relation, but interesting. A new scripting language with a focus on privilege separation and running with only what's absolutely needed has been popular, of course, in the headlines recently. You know, as more people become security aware. And of course, shell script.
It uses capability-based sandboxes to actually do security guarantees. And so it's kind of like regular shell scripting, except for you take away the ability for the script to do things you don't want it to do before you run it.
That's right. That's right. And of course, with shell scripts being pretty much everywhere, we're talking startup, orchestration, scripts for mass deployment, configuring, even compiling software. I mean, this just makes sense. And it's about time that more of this kind of stuff shows up.
I think the biggest one is we saw there was the Steam bug a little while ago, the Steam for Linux bug, and then recently a Red Hat one where because of a bug in their shell script, if a certain environment variable wasn't set, it did rm minus rf/ instead of / your Steam home directory or whatever. Right. So and so it would delete everything on the computer.
So I've always been paranoid of that because I remember back in the day when I ran OpenServer and I was shell scripting on there. I ended up RFing / right. So ever since then, I've always, whenever in a shell script, I'm going to delete something, I always have a check just to make sure it's not set to / by mistake.
Yep. And a couple of things like that. And so, I definitely see the value in taking any privileges that the shell doesn't need away. And because, we have also seen things where, improper escaping of a space or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're deleting 2 files instead of one file that has the space in the name. Especially if you name a file or name something with what eventually ends up as a / or something weird. You can do all kinds of crazy things. But on top of, they have a prototype of this that works. It runs on FreeBSD. And they also have the
Capsicum. It looks like for the sandboxing, which is really cool.
That's why it runs on FreeBSD, because there was a framework there they could build on. And they have a paper explaining it, and they also have a video from what's this? I can't see the URL; it's covered up. From Usenix, where they presented this from this work that was done at Harvard.
Nice. Looks like we have a link in the show notes to Hacker News where they've had a bunch of discussion on the topic as well. So you may want to read through that.
The web page is pretty sparse. They do have a manual though. Yes, I would definitely check out the Hacker News and find out more about it as well.
Okay. Well, nice. Well, next up, we now have some OpenBSD news, and it's OpenBSD First Impressions. We got a blog post here where a brand new BSD user has started documenting his experience through a series of course, blog posts on his site here. He's formerly a Linux guy. He's tried out FreeBSD and OpenBSD so far and is currently working on an OpenBSD desktop. And the first post kind of lays the framework here for the foundation on why he chose BSD at all, why he's switching from Linux, how the initial transition has gone, and what you'll need to relearn and what he's got planned going forward in this experiment. He says he's only been using OpenBSD for a few days as of the time when this was written, and we don't usually get to hear from people this early on in their BSD journey, so it's kind of a unique perspective to hear of what he's looking at just being a few days into it. But fascinating article about his switch.
Interesting to follow, and we can find when he finds a problem and gets stuck at it, it's like, oh, that's something we need to do a tutorial about, and then help so that the next person that is going through this switch will have an easier time. So
maybe he'll have to write in and let us know what that problem is.
And so also anybody else who's just getting started and having stuff. We love to have questions sent in just so we can answer them, but also it gives us an idea of where some of the weak spots are for people coming from other backgrounds.
Okay. Well, lastly in the roundup here, we got a PCBSD thing. I actually posted this to the blog this morning called PCBSD and 4K. Oh my. And it's always fun to brag about new hardware, right? We like talking about new gear, new things we got. Well, yesterday I had a couple 4K monitors delivered here.
Nice.
Based on the long and short of it is what happened was on IRC, some people were talking and somebody said something to the effect of PCBSD doesn't support 4K monitors. And I was, immediately I perked up like, oh, like wasn't aware of that. I don't have any 4K. Let's fix this. So anyway, one Amazon order later, the company sent over a couple 4K monitors and a new graphics card. Ended up going with an NVIDIA 960 GTX.
That's what I have.
That's what you have?
Well, not the GTX. Mine's just the
Okay.
950.
But I got that one specifically because it had 3 display ports.
Yeah, I think mine has 3 display ports, and HDMI, and only one
and a
DVI or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted. I was like, well, if I can do 2 display ports, I'm sure a third would work. But we'll just see if we can do. If we're gonna do it, let's do it hard. Let's do a dual head 4K just to see what happens, right? So basically, bottom line is it just worked. I just took my old monitors off the desk. As a matter of fact, the new 4Ks are sitting right here in front of me. That's why my face is so bright and it's like blazing. But 228K or 28-inch Asuses, I just popped those on my desk through the 960 in the system I have here under the desk, booted up, and just picked the display wizard for PCBSD, and it just worked. All I had to click was accept because it auto detected all the dual head and everything properly. That was perfect.
So how do the apps look?
They look great, actually. I use KDE for my main desktop here, and the first time I logged in, it detected the new resolutions and scaled everything. The fonts were perfect.
Yeah, because it's all Qt5 now. It has all the auto scaling.
Well, KDE4 is still using Qt4 in this case, but our apps are all Qt5, and those all worked fine. So honestly, the biggest things I've had to do is just tweak individual apps. So Thunderbird, for example, some of the fonts were set up improperly, like the minimum size, if somebody wrote in Unicode or whatever, it was like 0.12, I think, which was too small to read. Right. So I just bumped that kind of stuff up in Thunderbird. For KDE itself, I increased the panels on the bottom because this was coming from a pre-installed system. It still had my old panel size, which was too small at 4K. So I just bumped that up. And then the window decorations were too small. So I changed the size of that. Aside from that, I haven't really changed anything else. It just worked. One thing I did forget. The mouse cursor we were using on PCBSD was the old Jimac cursor, which I like it. It's a great cursor, but it doesn't work on 4K. The max size it can go isn't big enough. So we changed the default cursor to, I think, white glass or whatever it is, an alternate one. And I already made that change as a default because that has enough sizes that it'll go all the way up to 4K and beyond and look reasonably decent. The one thing I do want to mention, though, as kind of a PSA, when I first got the monitors and set them up, the screen, it was really jerky moving things around on the desktop, and scrolling wasn't smooth. And I found out on these particular monitors, the settings, when they ship them, they ship it with DisplayPort set to 1.1 mode only, which was annoying. I did not know you had to
compared to higher.
Yes. So it was only doing 30 hertz. When I finally looked at it, I was like, oh, it's 30 hertz. Why isn't 60 showing up? Well, you have to go into the settings on the monitor menu itself and say DisplayPort 1.2 mode. And as soon as I did that and I'm just logged out and logged back in. So X started again. All of a sudden it's like, 60 hertz is available and everything is silky smooth now.
Nice.
So
I think the biggest change I noticed when I switched to DisplayPort was just how much better all the colors look.
Yeah. The colors look fantastic on it. And it just,
I didn't think DisplayPort was going to be better than DVI, but it really is.
It is, and the monitors came with the DisplayPort cables and everything. It just worked out of box. That was probably about the easiest switch I've ever done as far as video stuff went. So I would like to say that we definitely can do 4K. If you do your research ahead of time and grab a great card that's got DisplayPorts and whatnot, it just works. So anyway, that was fun, and I know we enjoy talking about new hardware, and when things come out, it's always exciting to get new stuff.
Especially when they work out of the box.
When it works out of the box, which was amazing. So we are making some minor adjustments, like I said, changing the mouse cursor and some stuff like that for PCBSD 10.1.2, which is going to ship in a couple weeks. Nice. So just some minor tweaks. And our login manager, we noticed the fonts are really small in that. So we're going to tweak that as well so it scales better in this case. But definitely usable as of right now. And we're going to hopefully get these tweaks in. Those will ship in the next couple weeks as well.
Cool.
So anyway, we will move on from that, and it's time to get into feedback and questions here in just a moment. Okay, so we're back. We're going to get into our feedback and questions for the week, and then we have a discussion afterwards. But before we do want to mention the other sponsor this week, which is going to be TarSnap, and the URL for that, tarsnap.com/BSD Now, where you can go and get signed up. And of course, if you talk to the guys at TarSnap, let them know that BSD Now sent you.
Indeed.
And pretty much by the time we're done talking about this, you could have signed up, got an account set up, and started deploying the client on your BSD or Linux or choice or whatever
Even
platform you're on. Even Windows, that's right. You can
especially
fire up Cygwin.
For Windows, the TarSnap Mastery Book, which is linked right there in the news section on tarsnap.com/BSD Now, has all the recipes you need to do, quite advanced setups on whichever operating system you want. It covers Linux, Windows, BSD, etc. I think it even covers OS 10, and gives you everything you need. And yeah, TarSnap is, 250 pico dollars per byte month, or what most people would call 25 cents a gigabyte per month. And there's no minimum and there's no fixed costs at all. So you only pay for exactly what you use. You put a couple dollars in your account and use it until you run out. It really
cost should never be a reason not to be doing TarSnap backups. It's so minimal.
Yeah, I still have not managed to spend $1, and I've been going since January 1st, backing up twice a day all of my files.
So again, guys, it's going to be tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Go get signed up right now. Get your data backed up offsite, encrypted, where you can not have to worry about who may be looking at it or what's happening on the remote end, because only you have access to it, which is the way backup should be.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get into our questions this week. So first up, we have a Darren who sends in a package-ng follow-up to a follow-up. So he says, hey guys, wouldn't using package-ng with the base system as packages allow developers and maintainers to create their own fork of FreeBSD, or using the kernel to make a version of FreeBSD, aka a distribution?
Well, kind of PCBSD proves that you don't need to package the base system to, there are plenty of versions and forks and so on of FreeBSD.
Forks, quote unquote.
Yeah. Or distributions, kind of more in the PCBSD style. But at the same time, yes, basically by pointing to a developer's package repo, instead of publishing a patch for, say, hey, test out this change to the Haswell graphics drivers, instead of you having to download head, download the patch, apply the patch, and recompile the whole world to do it, the developer can just say, hey, point your repo to, Dumbbells FreeBSD, and you can just do package upgrade, and your system will be running that patched system, and you can try it out. And
it's more of a convenience thing for me. It just sounds like it'll be easier to do exactly what Alan's describing here. And I mean, there's no reason you can't now. Obviously, people could set up FreeBSD update servers everywhere, and you just update your FreeBSD update.conf file to point at different ones.
But yes, I think this will make it easier for developers to have branches where they'll be like, hey, try out this, especially things like Deshangen's Linux emulation branch. Right, so that's currently a branch of head that's kind of off on the side where a lot of huge amounts of work are going on, and it's very disruptive, and so that's why it's not happening in trunk or in the current tree. But having a build service that offers daily snapshots of that people could try out would be great. I think it'd lead to that Linux emulation stuff getting into head sooner because it'll be that much easier for people to test it, and that way more people will test it.
And I don't know if necessarily this means we're going to see this huge boom of distribution showing up and people rolling their own. I mean, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. I can't predict the future where that's concerned. But in my mind, anything that makes FreeBSD easier to use, easier to distribute, easier for people to roll custom versions of and do development and testing, that's only good. That's not necessarily a bad.
I can definitely see even for Scale Engine at work here, rolling our own snapshot of 10 stable with, just to get more stuff that's backported. Is it still
FreeBSD? It's not even technically a fork at that point. You're just rolling your own release of it.
We're making our own release of 10 stable instead of, waiting for 10.2 to come out.
Yeah. So again, that's just a good in my mind. It just makes it easier for people to do what they want to do with FreeBSD. From a PCBSD perspective, it makes it a lot easier for me as well because I can just issue packages and not have to run a FreeBSD update system to do it. But that's more just kind of a mechanics thing that we do behind the scenes to get you the PCBSD distribution, for lack of a better word. But at the end of the day, it's still FreeBSD. We're not necessarily a fork in that sense, where we've changed the kernel and changed sources and stuff. About the worst stuff we've forked is maybe the ports tree, which we've just changed a lot of options
to make them make more sense for a desktop instead of a server.
Yeah, there's just been a lot of stuff like that. So again, not a huge difference. So at the end of the day, you're still running FreeBSD. When you poke uname and look at it, it's still FreeBSD under the hood. Okay, well, next up we have Mitch, who writes in. He says, "Hey guys, I started the switch from Linux to PCBSD at version 9 and have been waiting for some smoothing of features to cut the Linux cord on all my machines. Systemd has pressed the issue, and version 10.12 promised the feature sets that I've been waiting for so long. So it's an exciting time. The strengths that BSD touted and the flexibility of the port system was a big draw, even though it's time consuming on my hardware. That said, it seems like someone sat down and wrote some code, and we're all trying to garner support for abandoning what a couple years ago was listed as a positive over Linux." I guess he's talking about ports here. He said, "Maybe I don't fully understand package-ng. It builds binaries from ports, but not using binaries used to be listed as a plus over Linux. Am I missing the point? Are we experiencing a systemd-like revolt against the tried and true Unix methodology? Looking forward to 10.12 and getting off of 2OS. Loves the shows."
Well, I think the point of the binary packages with package-ng was not to get rid of the ports tree. And the positive over Linux of the ports tree wasn't that you didn't have to use binaries or something, because there's no real value in that. It was that there was a framework to allow you to customize the binaries that you needed to be customized. You know, like I like my version of rsync with the patch that lets me set a time limit. Says I'm running my rsyncs on a cron, and I'm like, you can only run for 50 minutes, let a 10-minute rest, and then at the top of the hour, start a fresh one. And so, you know, I need that rsync with that patch. And that's not a default, obviously, because it's a custom patch and it could introduce bugs or whatever. And so, yes, I always do my rsync from ports that way. And so that was always the power. Previously, we were always told never to mix our ports and packages, because the binary packages before package-ng were built once, the day of a couple weeks before the release of 9.0, and they were frozen forever. And your port tree would be too new, and it would just cause you endless headaches.
Conflicts and pain.
Now that package-ng is being built, once a week, and especially if we can get the version of the port tree they use to be shipped with it, or even just give us the SVN revision number so we could download the same one, then that would remove all chance of any problems there. But even now, you're at most, it's, something changes a couple days, you might have a minor issue or something. But in general, it works very well. I definitely don't say this is any kind of revolt against the Unix methodology or anything. It's just, almost everything I download the binary package for, because, like you say, it saves you spending all that time compiling stuff.
Sure.
Like even on high-end servers that I've been deploying, compiling the, I don't know, it was like 200 ports or so that I needed for those servers took 45 minutes, and installing all of them from packages takes 3 minutes.
Sure.
And so that saves me a lot of time.
But I don't think anyone's saying the ports tree is going to go away or not be accessible to end users. It's still going to be there.
In the end, the packages you get from package-ng are just the ports compiled by a trusted server in the FreeBSD build cluster. And it just comes down to, you can install a couple of things that you need different defaults than other people from the ports tree and get the rest from the packages. For example, at Scale Engine, we have quite a few. We have options on almost every port that we use of the 200 or so ports that we use. So we run our own Poudre build. I build them all once, and then I distribute them to the 100 plus machines that way. And so, that gives me
convenience.
But yeah, the biggest thing is that on Linux, you don't get access to the build infrastructure that makes the packages. Whereas with FreeBSD, you do, because it's the ports tree. And especially going forward, if we're getting to the point of reproducible builds, you'll even be able to compile a certain package yourself and verify that it's identical to the version you got from the package manager.
Yeah, it's pretty slick.
If you have security concerns or something like that.
Okay. Oh, cool. Well, it's time now we have short feedback and questions this week, but we have a discussion segment. So I guess we'll throw it out here, Alan. We're going to talk about the comparison of the different BSD release cycles. And I know everyone who's talked about this or looked at this probably has an opinion on it. And I'm sure we do. I have opinions on this.
Advantages to all the different models. And
Yep.
So, I guess
We'll start, I guess, with we'll go with FreeBSD, OpenNet, and then we'll look at Dragonfly, and then talk about what they do, and then I'll give you my opinion on it. We'll see what Alan thinks. But so FreeBSD, their release cycle is they do a major release with new features approximately every 2 to 3 years.
It's usually pretty close to the 2 years.
Yeah, it's usually closer to the 2 year side. We've had some times where there have been .0 releases that get pushed back for a bit, so just depends. But also, then they do minor releases every approximately year or so.
And then with 2 supported branches, that generally ends up being 1 every 6 months. But you know, they're not really the same. So it happens about it once a year.
But it's gotten better. The schedule can occasionally get pushed back, but in the recent releases, it's been a lot closer to what the projected schedule was.
Yeah, and part of it is that. They haven't been as aggressive with the release schedule because they have to support all the old versions for 1 or 2 years, depending on stuff. With the new model coming in for 11, hopefully that'll solve a lot of these problems where instead of, 9.1 and 9.1 came out and it was supported for 2 years because it was the TikTok release. And then 9.2 came out about a little less than a year later, but was only supported for 1 year. And this led to the weird circumstance where the end-of-life date of 9.1 was later than the end-of-life date for 9.2. And this caused people to be awfully confused.
That's strange, yeah.
With the new model, the idea is that because of the ABI compatibility and the fact that upgrading from 9.1 to 9.2 doesn't require you to touch any of your packages or something, so it's not going to break any programs or anything, that when 11.1 comes out, support for 11.0 will end a couple of weeks later, like 4 or 6 weeks or something like that. And, then they don't have to support. And this will reduce the number of old versions that the security team has to support, which will mean we can get security updates out faster because we don't have to build them for as many versions. And it means we can do more frequent releases. And most importantly, for example, right now, we have the 9 stable branch and we've released 9.3, and there's not going to be a 9.4 because if we did, that would add years to how long we have to support the 9 branch for. With the new model, we could literally just say, while we're about to retire the 9 branch, but we're going to do a release of all the patches that have happened since 9.3 so that if you're, still using it for a while, there's kind of this roll-up release at the end of the branch to give you that little bit more time to get over to switching from 9 to 11 or whatever.
Well, one thing we should mention also is the minor point releases get some fixes from upstream, from current, but not necessarily the big ones because the promise is ABI stability.
Yeah, so they get most bug fixes unless it was very intrusive, and they'll get maybe minor new features, but they won't really get major new features because,
packages are built on the .0 release typically for the life cycle.
Or the oldest supported release, which for most of the branches is .0. For 9 right now, it would be 9.3, I guess, actually. But
sure.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of how it works on the FreeBSD side of things. So let's move on.
I guess that's the downside to the way that model works is that all new work happens in FreeBSD's head or dash current, which is what's going to be 11 next year. And so if somebody makes a new feature or fix or something, goes in there, and then it sits there for a while, and usually when you commit it, you set a timer for like 2 weeks or 1 month or whatever. And then once it's been there, no one's complained about it, and we think it's stable, then it gets merged from current back into like the stable 10 branch or whatever. But most importantly, especially if it's a new feature that doesn't get merged because it makes some major change or something like that, it means that while the developer committed it, say today, I've been working on this new feature for a year, I finished it, I committed it today. The first time a user that's not, actively going after the development snapshots or whatever is going to see that is when 11.0 is released early in 2016.
Sure.
And so by then, basically almost a year from now, the developer has moved on and is doing something else.
He's forgotten what he did already.
Yeah.
Many beers have been consumed.
So then the users finally get it. The users finally get it, and they start reporting bugs. But the developer who built the system hasn't touched it for 6 months, or has been working on a different aspect of it for 6 months or whatever.
We should come back to this, Alan, the commentary on the weaknesses of them and whatnot after we've kind of gone through what the alternatives are, so we can adequately compare and contrast.
Yeah.
But okay.
So OpenBSD.
OpenBSD. So they follow a strict release schedule of every 6 months. So in May and November, there's no concept necessarily of a major or minor release. For example, a .0 release is no different than a .7 in regard to big new features. Security issues and major bugs get backported from current to stable and errata patches for release. But otherwise, you just wait for the next release or run current for the latest features.
Yeah, so the big thing is they only support one release backwards. So, I think
the previous release.
Currently, the active version is .6, right?
I believe
5.6?
Yeah.
Or is it 5.7? I thought 5.7 is the one that comes out in May.
Yeah, I believe
anyway,
so.
So they only support one version back, and so that makes it easier for them to do this because they only ever have to backport one version. Whereas in FreeBSD a couple of months ago, that meant that you had to support 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 8.4, 10.0,
TJ's saying they
10.1.
support the last two, so it'd be 5.6 and 5.5 would be supported.
Okay.
Then when 5.7 comes out, 5.5 would be dropped. So the previous two releases. Okay.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah, so part of the way that model works is because they have a strict release cycle every 6 months, basically they have a 3-month window that they do a bunch of work, and then a 3-month window during which they're stabilizing and fixing all the bugs and making sure it's good, and then they release that. And then they start a new 6-month window of working on stuff. And the biggest thing there is that there's much shorter time between when something is finished and when it gets released.
When it's in your hands.
A couple of months at most, usually, basically the time between when it's ready and a user sees it is like 2 months instead of 6 or 8 or 10 months. And that
so
they don't have to do as much backward support, which saves them a lot of trouble.
So overall, the model's a little less friendly to businesses who say want a long-term support, but it's more in favor of innovation without concerns of backwards compatibility forever. So it gets the new code out to the users much faster is the point there.
It takes a lot smaller security team to backport patches because they don't have to go back through major versions, right? You're only dealing with the last 2 point releases or whatever.
Last 2 point releases.
The FreeBSD security team having to support 8.4, 9.3, 10.
And there's a lot of differences between 8 and 9 and 9 and 10.
Differences, especially between 8 and 9. It's like, there's
major
huge
stuff's
differences.
different. Yeah. So, So NetBSD is different also. They do different types of releases. They'll have their major releases like 7.0, minor releases like 6.1, and then security releases, so like 5.1.3. And their minor releases are similar to FreeBSD's stable system, in which bug fixes are backported will be in the next release. And it looks like starting with version 2.0, they've been trying to get one major version out each year, but that hasn't worked out for the last couple versions due to various showstoppers or another issue. But we're told that 7.0 release candidate is just around the corner. So, of course, we'll mention that in a future episode. Yeah, as soon as that happens. But so their system's a little different. Any other comment on that one, Alan? Or
no, it's just that they actually
pretty straightforward.
It's because they do the dot releases for each patch. So instead of FreeBSD 10.1-P5, you'd have 10.1.5. The big difference there is on FreeBSD, if you're doing a fresh install, you can't install an already patched 10.1.5. Whereas with NetBSD, they actually do the work to make sure that when you're doing a fresh install, you can start with an already patched version.
Yep. And then lastly, of course, we'll discuss Dragonfly BSD. So they aim for a release approximately every 6 months. Don't always necessarily make that cut. There's no freeze necessarily, but generally speaking, only minor work or necessary work goes into head in the 2 weeks prior to the branch cut. So usually only security and bug fixes will be MFC'd to the release branch after a release. Usually these occur throughout the life of the release and not necessarily force a point release, so as needed. Official point releases are made when a serious security or bug fix happens. And there's one extra little cool thing we want to mention here. Matthew Dillon gave us the summary, and we'll just read it here word for word. He says, larger development projects are typically branched in a developer's own private repo on the development box. We use Git, and the developer repos can be exported so anyone can access them to follow a major piece of work. For example, this is how the DRM work's being developed. The work is rebased and pushed into master by the developer when he thinks it's stable enough. We do not put these side branches in the official repo, so the official repo stays relatively clean. There are dozens of side branches sitting in developers' private repos in various states of development. The heavy use of these developers' repos means that release cycles do not create any significant disruption of ongoing work.
Yeah.
That's definitely more of a Git model.
Yeah. So with to contrast that with the FreeBSD one, coming up before the release of 11, there'll be a period of a month or two where any commits going into head have to be approved by release engineering. So, if you're at Netflix and you're working on some new feature to deal with their SSL or something, you basically have to hold all those commits and can't push them in. And especially with Subversion, that's not really that easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in FreeBSD, there are user branches that each developer has access to there. They can do that, although they're not used that often because in Subversion, the merging is a little more tricky than it is with Git because it's file-based instead of code chunk-based. And there are advantages and disadvantages to all those approaches.
Sure.
Having that history of all that work happening, be in the central repo and be preserved forever has a lot of value. Whereas the history of how that DRM work came about, kind of as far as the Dragonfly official repo is, it all landed at once as one big change, right?
Yeah, just showed up. Well, I think if you're doing it in Git though, when you bring it in, I believe it should preserve the individual commits, so you'll get the history as well. It just gets merged in as of the time when it was written in the first repo.
Yeah. So there's kind of advantages. And
that's what happens when we do a pull request, for example, or whatever. It's like it shows up, even though he did the work 2 weeks ago. It looks like the commit went in 2 weeks ago. Got merged in last night.
Cool.
So I'll mention too the PCBSD model. We follow FreeBSDs, but we do quarterly updates as well. So right now we're getting ready to do 10.1.2, which is still based on FreeBSD 10.1, but it's got a .2 on it because that's the most. We're basically cutting a new ISO and having the most recent ports as of for that quarter. So you can stay on the port tree for a whole quarter before you need to do an upgrade. If you're running on our Edge repo, you might be getting new packages every day or two, depending on how often I'm building and pushing them out here, just based on what we're doing at the time. So we have quarterlies, which would be more for your stable users, and then more experimental Edge stuff if you like to be on the bleeding edge and get the absolute latest Firefox from last night. But anyway, now discussion about these. So I don't know. Personally, Alan, I'm a little bit more fan of the OpenBSD model.
Yeah, the very strict release cycle has some advantages. It's like this release goes out on this day. And although even they've said, especially for making larger changes, like the SMP stuff, it's kind of held them back because they can work for 3 months and then they're frozen for 3 months, kind of.
Sure.
And they work for 3 and frozen for 3. And I think part of their biggest problem is because they're still using CVS, they don't have the developer branch to let someone keep working on it in the meantime. So with more of a Git style approach, or even just SVN with the user branches, it would allow some of that work to keep going and they'd be merged in chunks during the times when it's not frozen. And so that might alleviate some of that problem.
Definitely.
But they pass work around as patch sets. It's a different workflow and whatever works for them, honestly. Even on FreeBSD, even though the source of truth is SVN, a lot of people, work in Git, finish it up, and then just make a patch and then import that on top of SVN and commit it. And the downside of that is the missing history versus a Git merge. But
yeah, I mean, personally, I'd love to see like a FreeBSD where every 6 months we do a cut of current. And that gets its own package set. So it's all set on that ABI. And then that gets supported for a year or something like that with new packages.
I think the new support model will let us do that at least for, like, say, 11, for when 11's not head and 12 is dash current, where we can be like, all right, so every 4 or 6 months, we'll do the release, or maybe even every 3. If we can do quarterly, that'd be amazing. But
say we're doing a monthly current right now with its own set of packages, and that works. It's a little iffy though, because current's got a lot of flux in it. That's why I'd almost like to see like a quarterly or
for current, we're probably looking at just a repo you can point the package-based system at. But for like the 11, when it's actually released with the new support model, we could do a new version every 4 or 6 months or whatever off the stable branch. And because it basically invalidates the older version after a couple of weeks, it makes it, we don't have this support load, right? I think the biggest thing right now is that we don't do more releases of FreeBSD because basically that's more versions the security team has to support all the time, and it gets to be a big headache. And moving to the newer model where we're pushing people forward a little quicker, well, as long as we're staying in the same branch, it doesn't really affect customers that can't move forward as quickly, right? Because For example, when you get a binary driver from Adaptec for a RAID controller, it works on 9.x, but it won't work on 10. And so as long as you're staying in the 9.x, even if you're upgrading from 9.2 to 9.4 or whatever, even though there's no 9.4, it doesn't cause the problems. So we can do these point releases without causing anybody a headache, but get the newer features and the bug fixes to the users quicker. Because there's nothing worse than running into a problem, reporting it as a bug in FreeBSD, and being like, that was fixed in 9 stable. There's just no release you can download that actually has the fix. So being able to push those out,
well, and I'm hoping
ideally at least
having
quarterly.
the system, having the system packaged as
We'll
base,
also,
may help alleviate some of those problems where it's
specifically,
easier to push those out.
Yeah, when there is a fix, we have two systems, right? We have the security things where if there's a patch, or there's errata ones that aren't covered by FreeBSD update, where it's like, oh, if you have this problem, switch this one sysctl, or here's a patch for FreeBSD update that deals with file names that have a comma in them, or whatever. Being able to actually push those into the stable branch and have people package update and get the fix, I think will definitely make things better.
Okay.
There was a memory leak in NFS in 9.1 that caused me no end of headaches, and 9.2 wasn't out yet. So it was like, well, I can custom compile, my own 9.1 stable fix branch, but that's not very much fun.
Yeah, that's no fun, especially if you've never done it before. That's very intimidating.
Yeah, and basically you're now on an unsupported release, right? Because stable doesn't have...
You can't run FreeBSD update now.
Exactly. And so that means I have to recompile every time.
You're screwed. You
I
got
have
to do
to
it
do the
yourself
whole
again.
compile that takes many hours instead of a FreeBSD update that takes 10 minutes.
Yeah. So let's actually throw this out to the community, Alan. If you guys have ideas or comments on release cycles.
Like, what's your use case? What kind of release cycle works for you?
What's your opinion on those? What do you guys think is best?
Nobody wants to have to do a major upgrade. Maybe, is monthly too often? Is 3 months still too often? Is 6 months not often enough? How would you like to see it happen?
I felt like our quarterlies here are pretty decent. I feel like the ports are just starting to get kind of long in the tooth by the time we hit the next quarter and then the next one come out. And that's reasonable aside from every 2-3 weeks having new packages and having to do a big update and download a gigabyte or 2 gigabytes of packages every time.
Yeah, because there's definitely that. There are people that are bandwidth constrained.
So I think quarterly has been a reasonable compromise for us. But what's your opinion, you guys out there? Go ahead and write us in. And as we close the show, we'll send it to feedback@bsdnow.tv so we can get your ideas on that. And maybe those things will get passed along, and who knows, maybe that'll change things down the road. Yeah, but of course,
I can definitely see there are people with all the different use cases, and it's like, there are corporate customers that want a version they can just install and it's supported for 5 or 10 years. And I know the folks at Xinuous are working on...
they're doing a 10-year cycle.
10-year support on, whatever version of FreeBSD that you get from them, like 10.1, you get support for that version for 10 years, and they're going to backport the patches for you. And, having that available but not be the responsibility of the FreeBSD security team seems like a reasonable compromise.
That's a good idea, yeah. So, of course, we do welcome you guys sending other questions or comments or show ideas or topics or stories you want mentioned to feedback@bsdnow.tv. Also, we're still looking for some new interviews. So if you're interested in coming on the show, or somebody you can ping and bug and get them to come on the show because they're working on something interesting, tell them it's not a big deal. We will make this real easy and it'll just happen. It's all good. Me and Alan are real easy to talk to. And we do want to mention a couple location things. So first of all, any listeners in Poland, there's a new Polish BSD users group that's just started up. We'll have links to that in the show notes. So take a look. Also, if you're in Germany, there's a local BSD Install Fest happening May 15th in the Landshut area. Is that how you pronounce it? Anyway,
there's also something else happening in Germany at the Linux Hotel, the BSD event. That's in July. I'll get the details for that for the next episode.
Sure. And also India. A lot of people live in India, right? And we got a brand new user, New Delhi BSD users group, which has started up, which is ndbug.in. So definitely take a look at that if you're in India and looking for other BSD users to hang out with and discuss all things BSD. Of course, the show notes will have all the links to those. So if you're driving along along in the car, listening via audio or podcast, you can find that when you get back to the office. And also, the Euro BSD Con for papers has been extended for 2015. That's going to be in Sweden, in Stockholm. And we have the link for that where you can look at the extended deadline for submissions. But it looks like they've got a lot of last minute submissions coming in. So you've now got until May 22nd to send in your ideas. So that's a month from today, basically. So
that's good, because I submitted one idea, but I wanted to submit some more, but I hadn't had enough time to think of something and write it down.
So also, as we're wrapping up here, I'd like to mention, if you've been watching the video, I've been wearing this nifty hat this whole time. You could probably tell I'm a bit of a Star Wars fan. So I had an idea the other day. I forget what I was doing, but I was like, we can talk about other stuff on BSD now besides just BSD. If we have topics that come up that interest us, Alan, if you have something personally you'd like to mention. But I'm a big Star Wars fan, and the trailer came out this last week. So I just want to talk a lot about that for a moment here. Have you seen it, first of all, Alan? Are you a Star Wars guy?
No, actually, I'm not a big Star Wars guy.
Are you a Star Trek guy?
Yes.
Oh, he's a Trekkie. Okay, so we got a Trekkie and a Star Wars guy. This is great. The Lucas Hounds versus the Roddenberry guys. This is fantastic. So first of all, Alan, I watch your trailers when Star Trek stuff comes out. I'm still
I haven't seen it this week. It wasn't on purpose.
Well, if you haven't seen it by the time I show up on Friday, you're going to sit in front of my laptop and I'm going to show you the new Star Wars trailer. It's awesome. Seeing Harrison Ford, older Han Solo.
I have seen most of it then.
Okay.
It doesn't show very much. It's just a couple of 4-second clips and his face will fade to black.
Teaser, and then Mark Hamill talking, right?
Yeah.
Which, how cool is that, though? I mean, for me, this is a big moment. Like, this is something as a kid I never thought we would see happen.
Somebody pointed out there's one scene where it's like the Millennium Falcon flying into something crashed in the sand.
Yeah.
And there's these little guys down in the sand. There's apparently some homage to Spaceballs.
Nice. I love all the little Easter eggs like that. But that looks like a flipped upside down Super Star Destroyer, for those who are wondering. It looks like they're flying through the engines of that.
In a different shot, you see it's crashing into the sand.
Yeah. So it's definitely a cool new take on the universe where a lot of this stuff is old and the war had been fought a long time ago and we'd see the remnants of it. Somebody in chat says Chewie's not gray. Well, Chewie, he's different. He's like 200 years old at the beginning of New Hope.
Yeah, they have a much longer lifespan.
Yes, that and much better hair care products. So he definitely looks his best, and he brushes a lot, I'm sure. But anyway, I am stoked. I will be taking the whole family to see probably opening night. I don't know if I
have a feeling I'm going to be dragged to it as well.
Yes. This is an event for my family, and I think it's like December 18th, I believe. It's close to Christmas, so definitely looking forward to it. I don't know if I've showed you guys before, but give me just a second here. Let me grab this off the wall.
Yeah, I don't think I have
So, I am such a Star Wars fan that I have this here. I don't know if you guys can see this. This is a newspaper clipping taken from... What year was this? When The Phantom Menace came out. So that's me on the front there in costume. I waited 3 days in line in costume for tickets for the new Star Wars. This is back before you could buy your tickets online, right?
Right.
So when The Phantom Menace came out, it was like we waited 3 days in line. There was hundreds of people in line. It was like every night lightsaber battles for hours and people just talking Star Wars. I remember some guys showed up in some Star Trek uniforms and got beaten with lightsabers and ran off screaming to the Taco Bell across the street. That was pretty awesome. But anyway, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. But interestingly enough, the new trilogy, we don't talk about that in my house.
Yeah,
this is a non-event, and we pretend like it didn't happen. My kids have never seen the new trilogy.
Yeah, the Lucas messed up.
Yes. Lucas really
You're
lost.
Better off not seeing it.
So I'm an old school Star Wars fan, right? It's the original trilogy and that's it. And then maybe some of the expanded universe stuff in the books and whatnot. But this was the moment where I was really happy in life before George Lucas ruined my childhood with The Phantom Menace. And I remember we bought all these tickets to go see it and ended up getting bored and going to see The Matrix a couple times in the theater instead, because that was out at the same time. Yeah. But so I'm really hoping JJ does a good job with this new series. I don't know if JJ will ever see this or hear this, but it looks good so far. Don't screw it up for me.
Otherwise,
and my
you
kids,
will be known
please.
as Jar Jar for the rest of your life.
Man. Anyway, yes. This is just, you're hurting me, Alan. But as long as, looking at the trailer, it looks like a lot of practical effects. So I'm a huge fan of practical effects. CG has its place,
but you know, the new trilogy kind of showed how not to do it.
Yes. When you get to the point where you're making C-3PO digital because you're so lazy you won't get Anthony Daniels and put him in the suit.
Yeah,
that's just wrong. R2-D2 being digital is wrong. Yoda being digital, I'm sorry, it was wrong.
Yep.
You know, Frank Oz did a great job with the puppeteering and all that, and it was just fun. So anyway, I'm very hopeful seeing some of the practical stuff that's happening in the trailer here that JJ is going to redeem this a little bit. And sorry, Lucas, you screwed up. So this is a good chance to redeem the series for me anyway, and I hope it comes out good. But anyway, since we're obviously not talking about BSD at the moment, I just wanted to mention we may do this from time to time, and we'll try and keep it towards the end of the show.
So you can just turn it off if you don't care.
If you're just a BSD hound and you don't care about anything else in life and no other interests and aren't a nerd like me, you know, and maybe Alan, I'm sure when the new Star Trek stuff comes out, you may want to mention that and talk about it as well. Which, speaking of, isn't there a third one in development?
Yes, they just announced They announced the name of the thing. I think it's
okay, but it's not done by JJ. It's
somebody else this time.
Who is it doing it? I'm sure somebody could probably correct me.
All the information I know about it so far has come from Simon Pegg.
Oh, from Simon Pegg. Okay, good deal. But yes, we may talk about stuff like this from time to time. I'm a big video game guy too, so I may want to talk about what I play or what's going on the PS4 upstairs, which I might mention runs FreeBSD under the hood. So there's the BSD connection there. But anyway, that's kind of my Star Wars story and where I'm at, and looking forward to it. And I will definitely pass along more info like this down the road. Just as stuff interests me and comes to mind, you may see me wearing some other crazy helmet or something. I will probably show up in costume at the new premiere just for the heck of it, you know, for old time's sake, because that's what I did when I was, 18 then? 17? It's been a long time, Alan.
Yeah.
Wait, you're a lot younger than me, though. How old are you?
I'm 30.
You're 30? Oh, you're only 5 years-ish younger than me. But anyway, you're not a big fan of the new Star Wars, right?
No.
Okay. Good. We can agree on that. We can be happy.
We can definitely agree on that.
The new Star Trek I'm okay with. I did not like the second one.
The new stuff is... JJ ruined everything.
Well, this is what concerns me, because I am kind of a Star Trek fan too. Not a big one, but I like Star Trek, right? Didn't really get into Voyager, and definitely did not like the one on UPN. What was that?
Enterprise?
Enterprise, yes. When you start Star Trek with a country music song, you've just screwed up the entire series for me.
Music, it was worse than that. It was
horrible. Enterprise.
Rod Stewart.
That killed it for me. Anyway, I was a Next Gen guy growing up.
Next Gen and DS9 was all mine. That's what
yes. DS9 was good too. Yeah. But anyway, so JJ, you know, the first Star Trek I liked. The second one with Khan, not a big fan of. He ruined the continuity for me.
Yeah, it was just weird.
It was a little weird. So anyway, I'm a little nervous about Star Wars.
The other part about that is that, like, both of us being TNG and DS9 fans, is like, well, rehashing the original movies is like, that's not what really I liked about Star Trek.
No, you want to see it push forward, not go back. Well, I'm at least hopeful he's doing that with Star Wars. It looks like this is all in the future. And less that hopefully there's no time
although
travel.
Everything
oh my God, don't ruin Star Wars.
Everything in Star Wars is way in the past anyway, or something.
Yeah, well, it all happened a long time ago.
The one that is this thing that Star Wars always boggled me was that they never invent new technologies. They always find old technology of stuff that was already invented, but they lost it or something.
Right. Well, I like how it kind of flips that on its head a little bit. You know, where the universe is old and rich and full of all this stuff, and
we live in a post-apocalyptic thing, and we don't invent new technology. We have to find it. I don't know.
We find new stuff. I don't know. It's interesting.
Old robots that are better than our new robots or something.
Well, I like kind of the idea that technology has a curve to it, but then it reaches a point where it kind of levels off, diminishing returns, so to speak. In other words, droids have kind of gone as far as they're going to go in the Star Wars universe.
Except for they always manage to find an old one that's better.
Yes, from a better time, you know.
Yeah, it's just weird.
Which I think makes sense. Looking at the history of the world, you have highs and lows and ups and downs. You have your dark ages and whatnot. But anyway, it's exciting for me. And shoot, if we're at a conference or something when one of these comes out, I'm gonna have to drag you to it. So this weekend, I know Ex Machina comes out. Have you seen the trailers for that?
I've seen a trailer for that, and it looked pretty interesting.
Yeah, I may have to drag you to that this weekend if you have time or something. I may want to go see that. That looks very fascinating. But anyway, AI stuff's all cool. Anyway, that's about it for me here. Unless you have something else you'd like to talk about, Alan, I think we can wrap it up. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for hanging with us. And again, if you're going to be this weekend out at Linux Fest Northwest, look forward to seeing you. And we'll see you same time next week.